This segment is brought to you in part by the Canadian Historical Arms Society, owners of the Genesee Range, the premier recreational sport and training facility in Western Canada. See us online at historical-arms.com.
The Quiet Professional, a podcast about law enforcement, security, justice, and politics. We are digging deeper on the issues and going where the information takes us with access to experts and authorities. Welcome to The Quiet Professional. Hey everybody, welcome to The Quiet Professional. Today's episode starts with a seemingly simple story. A police officer and a prosecutor doing their jobs in a case connected to Antifa. Then politics stepped in and everything changed. What followed raises serious questions about the enforcement of laws, federal overreach, political weaponization, and the chilling effect this can have on police and prosecutors. And beyond the headlines, there are real long-term consequences for the people involved. Let's get to the introductions. But first up, I have April Sponsel here. She is a former prosecutor and now CEO of Legion Lex Institute. They are a professional education platform dedicated to elevating standards in law enforcement, legal practice, and public understanding of the justice system. With more than 2 decades in the criminal justice arena, she has handled complex, high-stakes cases involving violent crime and public safety. Today, she serves as a victim advocate, working directly with victims of crime to help them navigate court proceedings and assert their rights with confidence. Through Legion Lex, she trains officers, attorneys, and justice professionals in courtroom testimony, report writing, and professional accountability, while also educating citizens on how the criminal justice process actually works. My second guest is Sergeant Doug McBride. He is a retired law enforcement leader who served with distinction at the Phoenix Police Department. Over the course of his career, he worked complex investigations and frontline operations, earning a reputation for steady leadership under pressure and a commitment to officer safety and constitutional policing. In 2020, he was at the forefront of civil unrest and protest-related violence, navigating rapidly evolving operational challenges while balancing public safety and constitutional rights. Drawing from his personal and shared experiences during this turbulent period, he offers firsthand perspective on leadership, decision-making, and the realities officers faced on the ground during that violent and turbulent time for law enforcement in the Phoenix area, which is where our story begins. So, welcome to you both.
Hi. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, I'm glad you're both here. So we're going to kind of start in 2020. And if people don't remember what was going on in 2020, it was a shit show of a year, to say the least. But just to set a bit more of the ground there, we're talking around May of 2020. At this point, kind of in the world of things, we have COVID going on. I think it was like the first peak of COVID, some of the lockdowns and the amount of people that were infected. There was also the George Floyd event, and lots of things were kind of kicking off. So I'm going to throw it to you, Doug, and if you could start us with some of the stuff that was going on in Phoenix at this time.
Sure. And again, thanks for having us, Nathan. I appreciate you. So in 2020, on St. Patrick's Day in 2020, COVID hit Phoenix. That's when we started to get the shutdown, and the governor shut everything down and the mayor shut everything down. And we, for a couple of months there, it was real tough and work was hard. It was really difficult. People were getting sick. Some people were dying. I mean, we had employees die, of COVID. So I think part of rolling into is that COVID's a big part of it because no one really saw this coming in Phoenix. We're coming up on summertime now. It's late May, and this George Floyd incident happens, and I'm in charge at this point. My job is to take care of all civil unrest. So I'm monitoring Minneapolis very closely following the George Floyd thing. I'm monitoring the big cities, LA, New York, Seattle, Portland, our big, epicenters for destruction, basically. And I see that they start to, even Vegas, starts to have these huge unrest, targeting police officers. They're trying to lock police officers in stations and setting the stations on fire. I mean, as most people know, it was terrifying what they were doing across the country.
Yeah.
Now, being in Phoenix, we were a little bit insulated, right? Because we don't really have a hand in the game, so to speak. And it's summertime. So we've always said in Phoenix, no one's going to protest when it's 112 degrees out, right? And that was kind of our thing. Like, they're not going to last out there that long. That was always our rhetoric as far as protests go. So the very first night, I think it was May 28th, and we mobilized about a third of our riot and crowd control people. And I had told my command staff, I said, based on what I'm seeing around the country, I think we should mobilize everyone. And they're like, nah, it's summertime, basically what I just said.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a third of our contingent there. Thousands of people. I mean, I hate to estimate. I would say well over 5,000 people came out on that first night. And started to detonate explosives all around us. They blew out the front doors and windows of our headquarters. They surrounded us. They attacked us. They threw food at us. And it was really the first time in my 30 years that I had seen explosives used during a riot in Phoenix. I had never seen that before, and I had been part of that team since 2001.
Okay.
As an officer.
And you're like a ground level commander, or are you up in kind of the administration of it?
No, I'm on the ground, and I'm basically in charge of all of the grenadiers. Anyone that's going to distribute any kind of munition or less lethal force during these.
Okay.
I'm in charge of all of those individuals, and we had approximately 35 of them. But again, we only had a third of them out there the first night.
Mm-hmm.
So the first night we actually get our asses handed to us. I mean, we marched for miles that night, all way into like 3, 4 a.m. in the morning. It was hot. Like I said, it was, over 110 degrees, and we finished that night and we were like, we're in big trouble. We have to do something because this is going to be bad.
Yeah.
So the next day we mobilized the world. I mean, we had everyone there, every single grenadier, they're called the Tactical Response Unit, the guys that do civil unrest in Phoenix.
Okay.
Every person we could possibly get. I reached out to our SWAT team to get their grenadiers out there. The fire department came out. They were giving us IVs before we deployed. I mean, I had every resource I could possibly imagine at my disposal. And the same thing happened. We had the next 4 days, thousands and thousands of people showed up to just destroy property, attack police officers. At one point, cops were surrounded around the Capitol building to where we had to do a rescue. They smashed out dozens of windows of our vehicles, which unbelievably got replaced overnight.
If I can add on there too, so I was reading through the statement of facts they was sent over beforehand. So is this at the point also, like when they're deploying projectiles at you, fireworks? I saw the pictures of these. I mean, it's insane. It's insanity what's going on. But they were taping or gluing coins to the fireworks and other like little hard objects. So basically, it's like a literal grenade coming in.
Yes. So there's actually a video of me somewhere, I have it somewhere, but of me I'm sitting in front of headquarters, and all of a sudden you hear this boom above our head, and I'm like, holy shit, that's legit. Like and projectiles flying, that's what took out the windows of headquarters.
Like you almost think they're shooting mortars at you at this point.
Well, and that's the thing. It's hard to know what it is.
Yeah.
At that point, we know a lot more now, 5 years later, but at the time, you have no idea what they're doing.
Yeah.
And or what they're throwing. And it was brutal. We had that first week we were trying to catch up.
Yeah. Well, and so at this point, it looks like mostly just kind of individuals running around. Like, as far as it's individuals going around, and maybe they join a bit of a collective as a group, but nothing that you're aware of that is as coordinated as it's going to become.
Correct. At this point, we don't know who anyone is.
Yeah.
So, which is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that we did right away is I told all of the line sergeants and all of the TRU folks to just start calling out on the radio when you see someone do bad behavior. Just put it on the radio because everything's transcribed.
Yeah.
Just give a description. White male wearing a Yankees jersey with a red hat. And that way we could start to document, okay, at the end of the night, there goes Yankee shirt with the red hat. He 240, he aggravated assaulted an officer. Mm-hmm. Let's pick him up for that.
Mm-hmm.
So that got implemented early on, but in no way, as you said, we didn't know if it was coordinated violence or just random acts of violence.
And this continues throughout the summer. So this is the very beginning is in May, but we see kind of a progression throughout the summer. The violence continues, the property destruction, that all continues. But I guess your intelligence component and some of the tactics that the offenders are using, those start to change. You see like coordination in there.
Yeah. So one of the things the very first thing that we noticed after we started to identify people is they would start to layer up their clothing, which is very interesting because it makes it very difficult for law enforcement. So what they would do is they'd do their riot or their attack or their crime, and then they take a layer of clothing off, and we have a different person, right? It's more difficult to identify.
Yeah.
Them. So then we saw the implementation of, they made shields out of plywood. So we had 1/4 inch. Well, it was interesting. They did the 3/4 inch plywood first, figured out that was too heavy.
Yeah.
So they left those behind. We actually confiscated those. And then they went to 1/4 inch plywood because that was a lot easier to carry. And then obviously the umbrellas and the different things like that, staging rocks in garbage cans, marking those sites with certain paint marks and hands. We recovered Molotov cocktails. I mean, we had a little bit of everything in Phoenix, and people really don't know that how violent it was.
Yeah. Well, when you're running these units, and maybe I can kind of relate some of the issues we've had up here, but the intelligence component, was that non-existent? Was it just lacking? Was it something that just hadn't been thought of at the time?
I think because we started out with no one's going to do this in the summertime, it was lacking in the beginning.
Okay.
Now, after the first night, everybody was activated, right? So we had people on social media. We had people on the Facebook live because they could these guys were live broadcasting their what they were doing. So we got heavy on that after the first few nights and started to figure out who these people were, at least nicknames on social media and then photos of them, to figure out who they were.
So there was a social media component as well. Like somebody's monitoring that.
Yes, several. We had Homeland Defense. We had our people that what were they called? Anyway, there are people that work with all of the protest groups in Phoenix. Like, they're like liaisons. They're
Okay.
officers, but they're liaisons to these groups.
Yeah.
So all those people were checking in with their groups. What are you guys doing? What are you planning? That kind of stuff. And then we had our own I was in downtown operations unit at the time. So we had a couple of guys that were really good on social media that were also capturing stuff for us. When these people were broadcasting.
You know what? I want to mention, or at least recognize, at least that liaison team. So up here, we have a liaison team that works with our crowd management unit, and they do the exact same thing. They know a lot of the people who organize these events or protests and different things that are going on in the communities. And they have they're really in tune with what's happening with their community. And whether that's like a political agenda or something race-based or whatever it might be, they're the ones that you can kind of reach out to first and say, yeah, we're going to have this event. We're doing it peacefully. We're doing it lawfully. But you always get kind of agitators who always just want to attach themselves to these bigger groups who, especially if they're going to get any airtime, like if media is going to show up or a politician, you get all those agitators just kind of attach themselves. And then they try to bring all their friends and they stir up all this stuff. So, one of the things I guess I'm really trying to paint a picture of is showing how police are in the middle of a lot of this, where you're trying to let people exercise their rights, but also deal with the people that come there for the criminality portion of it. And, it doesn't, I say the media does a bad job at this, and then the politicians do a bad job at this, is kind of deciphering between the two or weeding one out while, giving praise where it's due, but also calling out the people that are committing the crimes, right? Like police are in the middle of it and we just get to be the punching bag and nobody else takes any blame in there. So,
well, it's interesting you bring that up, Nathan, because it's a very, one of the things I tell people when I do trainings and when we talk about riot and crowd control and policing is that it's contrary to everything else we teach a police officer. So, when you go to the academy, you're told don't let anyone get into your kill space, right?
Yeah.
21 feet is the kill distance, right? Don't let people get behind you, right? Don't let people touch you. Don't let people touch your equipment, right? And in riot and crowd control, that's completely flipped. They get behind you, they touch your equipment, they pound on your shields, they throw things at you. They're in kill distance. I mean, you're in touch distance most of the time at these things. And it's a very difficult way of policing, right? Because we don't know who anyone is, especially in the beginning. Mm-hmm. We don't know who anyone is. We don't know what they're throwing at us because it explodes. So we don't have a tangible, oh my God, they're throwing whatever it is, M80s, rocket launchers, whatever it is. And then, you have bad actors, like you say. We had a guy show up with a flamethrower mounted to a truck. We had kids skateboard breaking, windows out of while cops are inside the actual vehicles, setting our vehicles on fire, slashing our tires. We had all of those things. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting. And it's an important thing I think people need to understand is that riot and crowd control policing is not what you're taught in the academy. Mm-hmm. It's not anything like that.
One of the biggest things also that we deal with up here, and I think they still haven't really settled on a decision, but it's like what happens when you're presented with a lethal threat in a crowd. And it's like, unless you're basically within touch distance of making a shot. I mean, if a guy's standing in the back of a crowd, engaging you with a rifle, let's say, all you got is a pistol on the front line, you're not going to be able to engage that person. And like you're saying, a lot of your use of force goes out the window. Like the whole game has changed. You've got a lot of innocent people around. Like it is complete chaos, and it is one of the most difficult things to police, and let alone prosecute, I guess, as we'll get to as well. So,
yeah, and I think, and there's another misnomer, and this happened amongst police officers when I was doing the training and conducting all the trainings, when the misnomer is, well, don't you have snipers up on the buildings, right? Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, we always have sniper teams up on the buildings. but they're not designed to take out a threat that's on the ground.
Yeah.
That's a very risky shot, especially with a 308 rifle.
Yeah.
So they're actually your snipers teams that are up there. That's for other snipers that may start attacking the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
It's not to take out someone with a Molotov cocktail on the ground.
Yeah.
The only way to do that is my grenadiers, and that's where we train to. You would shoot non-lethal to the face and head area to stop that attack. So that's the other thing. You're exactly right. Guns are useless, really, in these scenarios.
Yeah,
they're useless.
April, maybe you want to jump in on this too, but for the both of you, so we're kind of progressing from May of 2020. You start seeing more of the coordination, and your intelligence starts picking up. Some of the stuff that you'd sent me on a list here that you were seeing was there were some of these groups, once you kind of identified them. So there's the Antifa group, there's an ACAB group, and I just want to make a distinction on this ACAB piece, because up here in Canada, we don't necessarily have a group that calls itself ACAB. It's more of a slogan or a statement that you see people spray paint everywhere, right? Like all cops are bastards. So people have tattoos of it. It's a saying, but it's not a group. But in this context, they were an identified group, if I'm correct.
Yeah. So it was interesting. There was an evolution throughout the summer. So and April, you're better at this than I am. There was I believe it started off with. Do you remember the first group? Do you know?
Normally, Nathan, we don't like to use actual group names because then that just gives them more clout.
Oh, okay.
But I think that it's important in this context because of the way that the groups were actually coming together. So we had they had identified a couple of different groups. We Rising was one. And then we also had another group called the Bruce Franks group. And then, of course, we had the Antifa ACAB group, and then, of course, the BLM groups.
Okay.
And so that's kind of what we were seeing early on, is we had these individual groups that all of a sudden started meshing and working together. And so when you bring up the question about ACAB being more of a slogan, you're absolutely correct. A lot of times, the use of ACAB is meant, that all cops are bastards. But what was different with regards to what we were seeing throughout the summer with the intelligence is the coordinated effort that these particular groups were evolving into.
Okay.
And some of the things that we were learning about is and Doug will be able to really talk about this, is about the tactics that they were bringing from, Portland, and bringing those types of things to the Phoenix area because they wanted Phoenix to be another Portland issue.
Yeah.
And so that's what we were kind of seeing when we started to take a look at, do they meet the statutes for criminal street gang rather than just an ideology?
Okay, and I'll help you a little bit here too, Doug. So some of the stuff that was listed, what you were finding was they were circulating compiled address lists of police personnel and political figures. They were starting to do kind of their own counterintelligence, so they were identifying officers as well, but also finding addresses where they worked, where they go to church, things like that. They were digging into officers' backgrounds, and I know this is a thing that came up here in some of our deployments, all the doxing. So that's why they switched from like a name on the name tag to just the regimental number or register number, depending on the service. And there was also discussion of tactics to interfere with police operations. And on that, just kind of in preparation for this podcast, I was reading through some of Andy No's, his book and some of his reporting. I mean, he's probably the most famous Antifa reporter that's out there. And the level of training and education and coordination, like it's like almost going to a school to be an anarchist, but then they help you coordinate things from one city to another. And you mentioned this, like even in the statement of facts, you start seeing vehicles. You mentioned vehicles start getting involved. They're handing out water. They're bringing in food. They're helping them, kind of replenish their stocks of whatever they need. So, Doug, if you want to kind of comment on that, like some of the tactics you were seeing, the coordination.
So vehicles and motorcycles became a big issue for us as the summer progressed. And obviously we're on foot, they're on vehicles. That's bad for us, right? And then of course you had Boston where they ran over like 6 guys, 6 officers during a riot. So we have to prepare for that as well, which is why the stun bag was such a huge tool for us in the summer of 2020, because you could fend off a vehicle pretty well. You could scare people pretty well by hitting the vehicle with the stun bags, with the little sandbags, because it made a big thump and it's scary.
Is it just like out of a shotgun?
Yeah, just a 12 gauge shotgun.
Okay.
And it's we used the Super Sock. It's a perfect, it's really precise actually. And we could defeat and scare cars away that were approaching our line. But we had, these guys weren't even hiding it. At one point, we saw all of the main players in a park practicing the takedown tactics for police, how to breach the line, how to submarine the line, how to get behind the line. And they were out in the park, just, we videotaped it. I mean, we could see them practicing and being taught how to do the things that they eventually ended up doing to us. I mean, at one point, we had a detective who was part of the liaison group who was in the crowd, and it was part of one of Bruce Franks's things. And one of his people took their megaphone and put it right up to her ear and blew her eardrum out. Like blood was coming out of her ear. And we had identified him, but she did not want to prosecute. And so we never prosecuted that individual.
Wow.
But serious, significant, permanent injury to someone who's just trying to be a liaison to your group, just trying to say, hey, where are you guys headed? What route you taking? That kind of thing. They were extremely violent. They got our chief of police, Jerry Williams, address, and were planning on going to her house. They tried to find mine, but my records had been sealed for 20 years, so they couldn't find me. They found Ben Moore's address. They were going to go up to his house, which again, the domino effect of all this is, let's just take Ben Moore, for example. He now finds out that they have his address. He has a family, he has a wife, kids, the whole 9 yards. So now what does he do? He's paying someone to install a security system into his home to make sure he can protect his family while he's working for 170 days straight.
Yeah.
Because Ben or I could have a day off during that time because we were the subject matter experts regarding riots and crowd control. So you think about the residual, that's just one example of the residual of these threats and these people obtaining these addresses and thinking that they're going to show up at your house and what they're going to do there is a whole nother level of policing, right? I mean, that's a whole nother level of now my family might be in danger. And what are those conversations like, going back to my kids and my wife and saying, hey, don't answer the door. Don't do this. If you see someone, call this number, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of residual outside of police work that gets affected by this behavior as well.
Okay. So we're kind of progressed through the summer. We're starting to see the coordination, as we mentioned, identifying groups, repeat offenders. Where do we kind of go from there?
So I didn't get involved until a couple weeks after the end of May. And I think it's really important for people, especially who sit in an office all day, like I did, and to know exactly the disconnect of what was happening on the streets versus, what we were hearing about what was happening. Seeing versus hearing is completely different. So I get chosen by my office to do the prosecutions of any of the cases that come in under riot and things of that nature. So I start getting cases sent over to me. And I start reading them and I'm all like, oh, I'm not really sure about this one. I don't think that it meets our charging standard. And so what I would do is I would automatically just turn around and send them to the city for misdemeanor prosecution because I didn't feel as though that the actions rose to the level of a riot. And the reason why I did that was because of my lack of understanding of what was really happening. Like, for instance, like, Doug said, something about a flamethrower being on the back of a truck. I didn't know that. Early on in the summer, I didn't know that there was a dude walking around with a flamethrower, setting trees on fire throughout the downtown area. And that every officer, days after all of this began, were given the little miniature, fire extinguishers so they can start putting the fires out that were being started by different individuals or by these individuals.
Can I ask on that though, where
Sure.
and this would almost be for both of you, was what was reported on the media, like the nightly news online, was that matching what you were seeing on the ground? Because that is one of my biggest gripes up here, but I think I know what the answer will be.
No, it wasn't. And I was actually, I would actually watch the news and see kind of like what they were reporting, because then it kind of would help, put me into, a different mindset, because I wasn't out there. I wasn't on the street.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know above and beyond what was written in the reports.
Yeah. Interesting question, Nathan, because at first, the first 4 nights when shit hit the fan, they did carry it. Even ABC 15, they had video of the kids smashing windows out on the police car by the Capitol and surrounding the officers. They actually had footage that I saw. And the interesting thing is that if you try to go find that footage now, it's very difficult to find, if you can find it at all.
It just makes me think of like when we were deployed to the nation's capital, so in Ottawa, for COVID, and basically a protest group had taken over the capital. We were sent there to push them out of certain area. And when I would be on the ground for a couple days, we were on the ground moving crowds, and then I would go to the hotel at night. The narrative on the media did not match what I was seeing as a police officer on the front line. We were being told it was basically white supremacists, not neo-Nazis. They're like just all these rapists and racists and all kinds of stuff. When what I was seeing on the ground was a very mixed crowd, ethnically, race-based. Like when you think of truckers, who drives most of the trucks? So that's what, we're seeing this crowd and we're going like, this is not what's on the news, but the news was really reporting a certain way. And I think, I guess the biggest issue I'm seeing here too is, how can you have a justice system that functions when people are not being informed properly? So for yourself, April, if you're not on the ground, you're kind of relying on news or word of mouth to tell you what's happening out there. But if they start leaving things out or twisting certain narratives, then you become misinformed. Well, it just starts falling apart. So like, do we want a functional justice system or not? So we have to make sure all the participants are being informed.
Right. And I would agree with that, because I think that is absolutely on point, is that there is a lot of people that don't understand what was really going on. And I'm a perfect example of it when I started first getting the cases and I started sending them to the city, because like, for instance, I didn't know really what the LRAD was. The long range acoustic device. And so I'm sitting there and I'm reading these reports and I'm like, well, this doesn't make any sense. How can people that are literally what I know to be 5 blocks away from where the LRAD is stationed, how can they actually be hearing the commands from the officers? Yeah. And it wasn't until later on in the summer that I finally heard the LRAD, and I was all like, oh, wow, that thing is extremely loud. So that you would have heard it all through the downtown area with no issues whatsoever. Yeah. But that's why one of the reasons why I was just pushing the cases off to the city because I didn't understand, and it wasn't really well written, and none of that type of stuff was put out in the news for me to say, oh, what is that going on in the background? So it was the lack of knowledge, and I think that that's one of the reasons why Doug and I have now, I guess, because of where we're at in our lives, are now wanting to make sure that we come out and we tell people, hey, you know what you were seeing in 2020 in the city of Phoenix is not what was being portrayed in ABC 15's reports and other news media, because it was a heck of a lot more violent, and a heck of a lot more coordinated amongst the efforts of these groups. And one of the things that you had brought up earlier after Doug talked about it was the liaisons between the groups. Were there groups that were out there that went and got the proper permits to be able to go out and do the proper protest, that they did want to, peacefully protest? Absolutely, there were. And then the agitators were coming in. While the agitators were coming in, the people that were like, oh, we're here just to, do this peacefully, they're moving out while all the violence is starting to begin. And that's why it was so important for, the intelligence and everything to, get rolling, to be able to see, wait, who are the agitators versus those of the people that actually just want to go out there and peacefully protest.
So, and on that, maybe I'll mention too, because I think this was in the statement of facts, and correct me if I was understanding it wrong, but even though the peaceful protesters, we'll call them, go out and they're doing their thing, they're doing their march, whatever it might be. And then all the people come in that want to do the destruction. So we have all these offenders coming in. They start doing that. But even while that's going on, and then over the next few days, the peaceful protesters still want to show up and protest. And to me, I never understand that, because we've seen that a little bit, up here, where it's like, okay, I get you want to say something or you want to, get your point across. But once the chaos starts, why would you want to come around? Because either you're going to be collateral damage, right? Like once we throw gas into a crowd, it affects everybody. Or you might all of a sudden start maybe you'll get confused for being a part of the group that's causing the problems. Like, I just don't get why they would still show up to the same areas or be anywhere near this stuff. It's like, okay, you know what? It's gotten way out of hand. We want no part of it. We'll go protest another day, or we'll go way to the other side of the city or something. But it just, to me, it's like, once you get those big crowds, it's like, yeah, your normal protest is over. We can do it another day. So that just seemed interesting to me on that part.
Yeah, no, and I would agree with you, and I think that Doug can speak to this, but that's where it became so very difficult in weeding out those people who just happen to be on the sidelines and not doing anything. And it became important for me, whenever I was reading a report, to sit there and read and see exactly what was going on, what was each individual person doing throughout the summer. I wasn't looking at the actions of others. I was looking at what are the actions of this particular individual that I'm looking at charging with felony offenses, because charging somebody with felony offenses is absolutely 100% a game changer, for people, if they're not doing anything wrong. That's the reason why it became very, very, at least for me, very important that the officers were documenting what each individual was doing, so I could stand behind that documentation and say, hey, this is why I have charged this person with this, and this is why they meet this, based on the intelligence that we were receiving throughout the summer.
I think part of it, Nathan, with what you're saying about why the people would keep coming, right? And one of the things I deduced from the summer, and then reflecting back on the years afterwards, is that there was a genius in Black Lives Matter, right? It was a genius slogan. It was very captivating for people, college students, young professionals, right? I mean, it really got the masses moving under this umbrella of Black Lives Matter, right? And obviously we would agree with that statement, right? Like Black lives do matter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they do. But in this particular case, it was almost weaponized with the bad actors, because you'd have a group of professionals and kids and whoever come out to do a protest, but those bad actors would be in that crowd and anonymously be able to attack police almost at will.
Yeah, well, I'll say on that, anybody bringing children to police or to protest should be grounds for instantly your kids taken away. That's just my opinion. I can't stand that when I see that. Like, that
If I
is,
was in charge, right?
you are a crappy parent. Okay, so back to the story though. You were kind of building the blocks there, April, of like where we're progressing to. I'll throw it back to you.
So anyway, so we were talking about, as the cases started to come in, and we're, building those blocks, and I'm talking with the officers. There was one officer that was kind of assigned to us to make a determination as to how these cases are going to go. He was kind of a liaison for us before I had actually started talking to Doug. And it's kind of funny because one of the things that became a big, huge issue later on was that there was an allegation that I personally was out there, on the streets, directing arrests and everything and stuff like that. Or that I knew these officers and I had worked with these officers for years. And the funny thing is that I had never met Doug McBride. I'd never met Ben Moore. Some of the officers that were on the front lines as the riot officers or TRU officers, I did know some of them. I had worked cases with them in the past, but the ones that were spearheading everything, like I said, Sergeant McBride and a couple of the other officers, I had never even met my whole entire life. So as the summer went on, I had one point of contact that I was pretty much basically dealing with. And so when the cases were coming in, he would let us know, hey, we've arrested, this group, these people and everything, and these cases are coming in. And I would be on the lookout for those cases. And then I would make a determination as to whether or not they would be charged or sent back or completely just turned down for prosecution instead of going to the city. It was myself and one other prosecutor that were pretty much basically triaging these cases as they were coming in, making it a determination. So, but as the summer continued, we had noticed that there were some of the groups that were becoming, again, even more violent, more coordinated. I mean, there was one group that specifically wanted to shut down the freeway, and we had learned that because there was a traffic stop that was conducted on one of the nights of one of the big riots. And it was conducted by Phoenix Police's gang unit.
Okay.
And yeah, and so they had stopped an individual that had, they had stopped a vehicle that had 4 individuals in it. And 2 of these individuals had cell phones on them. They had assaulted the police officers, and they were arrested. And so the officers ended up getting their cell phones. And they ended up writing search warrants and downloading the signal chats that became extremely relevant with regards to the building of the gang charges and things of that nature, because of what they were saying in the chats, showing that they were very well coordinated. Again, looking for officers' addresses. They got the Phoenix mayor's home address. The chief of police, they were conspiring to go over and kill Ben Moore. And so because their 2 targets were Doug McBride and Ben Moore, a lot of times through the signal chats. So as we started seeing, we were learning their tactics of, let's say, for instance, legal advisors, who they would have people that would stand back and pretty much basically wait for police officers to do something that they felt as though was a threat to to whatever they were trying to do and start filming them. They had fake journalists, where they would embed people that were part of their team in as fake journalists, with the journalists, insignia and everything and stuff like that. So they could document anything that they could then turn around and doctor and provide to news agencies such as ABC 15.
And even on that, so when I watch some of these video clips you see on social media from the protests, and you'll have somebody in there just ramming their camera right into the fight that's going on. And then when police look at them, they start screaming, media. Like, that should not be a home free, a get out of jail type thing. It's like, we have cameras now that can see for a kilometer. You can take high definition pictures from way over there. Like, you, as a journalist and media, I don't get why they would even be allowed anywhere near the front line. Like, you can reach all these different angles from a safe distance away where you're not interfering. Like, is that not a possibility?
Well, here with the First Amendment, they have the right to be there. But I agree with what your analysis, like the people, why do they keep coming back to these areas if there's a riot going to happen? Why would journalists put themselves in there? Because it's sensationalism.
But you can be there, but you don't have to be, within 5 feet. Like, you can be 30 feet back, right? Like, there can be a responsible and safe distance. I just don't understand that. Like, if you're media and you want to be on the front lines, it's like you're part of the group.
Yeah. I think it's sexy though, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you remember, I mean, you're kind of young. You look young to me, but Gerardo Rivera, way back in the day, was a big time reporter.
Yeah.
And he ended up going over to Afghanistan and embedding with the troops, and he's there getting, explosives everywhere, and it's sexy, right?
Yeah.
I was there. I was in the crowd, right? But it's a huge problem for policing because the lights on their cameras that glare in our faces that we can't see through a plastic shield on our face, through a gas mask on our face. Now I've got this light glaring at us. It was a very big problem for us.
Yeah. And, and like I said, triaging, myself and another prosecutor, we're taking a look at everything as the summer continues to go along. We're charging some individuals, but again, with riot, aggravated assault, a lot of aggravated assaults on officers. I think we all, out of the aggravated assaults, we probably maybe even saw just 1% of those, just because the amount of assaults that were occurring on officers. And whenever I say 1% of them, it's not because the officers didn't want to be listed as victims, because in Arizona, one of the questions that they will ask, what law enforcement will ask, and I hate this question, is to a victim is that, do you want to aid in prosecution? Well, if the victim says no, they don't want to aid in prosecution, then that is a big red flag for the prosecutors to turn the cases down. But what we had is we just had a lot of individuals that were not identifiable. And that goes back to the layering of the clothing and, the covering of the faces and everything. I think it is so hilarious now that we have, ICE agents out there trying to do their jobs, and people are saying, well, why are they covering their faces? Well, that's what they were doing in 2020 with regards to, committing criminal offenses. The criminals were. So, but as the cases were coming in and we were seeing the aggravated assaults on the officers, not only were we learning about, the tactics from the Phoenix officers, but we were actually in contact with U.S. Marshals Service. Because one of the U.S. Marshals was actually in the federal courthouse, which is steps away from the Phoenix PD headquarters here. And he had actually observed individuals attacking officers. And so I started talking to him and learning more about what was going on in Portland versus what was happening in Phoenix, because he was actually going between the two cities. He was going between Phoenix and Portland. and back and forth. And what he told me is what he was seeing in Portland was absolutely 100% being brought back to the Phoenix area, which then helped us come to the final determination, with regards to really trying to solidify who these groups are, what type of charging could they be looked at. And it wasn't just the state that was looking at potential charges, but it was also the feds that were looking at potential charges for terrorism as well. So there was a lot of things that were going on that a lot of people didn't even realize was happening.
Okay. And this would be the first time you're kind of now starting to think this is like we're looking at these gang-related charges.
Actually, not even then.
No? Okay.
Not even then. It wasn't until October 17th, the events from October 17th, that it really got solidified with one group. Prior to that, there were...
Yeah, it was the one big eye-opening event, Nathan, was one of the individuals got arrested in Gilbert and was also a victim of a crime. And this person decided to be an informant and tell that Gilbert detective the hierarchy of this group, that they were meeting at different homes.
Okay.
They provided the address for these places, which we actually sent out surveillance to observe the same vehicles we were seeing at the protests and riots, the same people. And they were all meeting to have meetings on how and what they were going to do moving forward. This person indicated that individuals were getting tattoos of one ACAB, the 1312, on their bodies. They changed their social media to hashtag ACAB on all of their documentation. The Signal app was labeled, I forget what it is, April, you know it. The Signal app was labeled, was it 1312?
There was one portion that it was changed from 1312, and then there was I think there was one that was called the ACAB Book Club, but I have to look it.
Okay.
So they were. This is where the slogan now becomes an identity, right?
Yeah,
So,
it sounds like they're developing a whole ideology. There's like a whole identity behind this thing now.
After we get these Signal chats, and after we learn that there is an informant that is working this informant was working both sides. The informant was working the ACABers, and the informant was actually working law enforcement. And whenever I say working law enforcement is that this person was intentionally pitting both of them against each other.
Okay.
But as we're going along, law enforcement is learning more from this informant about how violent, and the information that this informant is giving law enforcement is 100% vetted, and it's 100% turning out to be true and accurate. And so as the summer is going along, the FBI decides to go ahead and sign this individual up as an actual informant. But that relationship turns sour pretty quickly because the informant, unbeknownst to the FBI task force, this person started recording the meetings between the informant and the handlers, basically. And that was a violation of the agreement. And so prior to October 17th, the FBI ends up saying, we're no longer going to have you as an informant. Okay. So, and the reason why I bring this all up, because it kind of sets the stage even more for October 17th. So, but prior to October 17th, Doug had mentioned that one of the things that we were doing is that we were going out and informing law enforcement partners about what they were seeing in downtown Phoenix, because it was spidering out to different cities. These guys were not only operating within the city of Phoenix, headquarters and precinct areas, but they were going out to Gilbert. like they had been earlier on, but then they had spidered out to Mesa PD, and a couple of other, locations.
Mm-hmm.
So we had set up some training. It was actually, I think, Doug and Ben that had set up the training to talk about the tactics. And they had asked me, hey, would you mind coming in just to let the officers know what you've been seeing through the charging and, and taking a look at everything. And even at that point, and that was early October. I think it was October 12th. And on October 12th, when we gave this training, we still were not 100% had even thought about criminal street gang charges into any of these groups, had not even been on anybody's minds at that point. It wasn't until October 17th.
Okay.
Now, at this point, the informant has been kicked by the FBI for recording them. And there's a post that came out saying that there was going to be a protest on October 17th. And there was a picture that was put on social media, about advertising this protest, and that it was not going to be a peaceful one.
Yeah. So October 17th says it's not going to be a peaceful protest. Don't bring children. Don't bring elderly. And this had happened throughout the summer. So, We Rising splinters off because they're not violent enough and they want to be more violent. So this finally ACAB ends up being the most violent of the groups, if you will. So the people that came from all these other factions join this group and become ACAB. And October 17th, we're ready. I mean, the city of Phoenix is ready. Everyone's mobilized, and they gather at the park at Van Buren and about 7th Avenue, and they spill out into the street and they shut it's a weird intersection. It has Grand Avenue. It's 3 different streets intersecting each other. So there's a ton of traffic, and it's prime time. It's evening. And so they just spill out and start shutting everything down. They're chanting ACAB. They have ACAB signs, full black block clothing, can't tell man, woman, race, age, nothing. And they block all the streets, and they set off a couple of smoke bombs to obscure our vision. And they take a bunch of construction equipment and spill it into the street to where one of our Tahoes is disabled. It's temporarily disabled because one of the barricades gets up in the wheel well. They continue for a long time going the wrong way on a one-way street. So we had to deal with that obstacle of shutting down the traffic and redirecting all the traffic. And then it culminates with, and a lot of people don't know this because you're just not a part of it, but they basically said they were going to shut down the light rail, which is our version of like a public transportation system downtown. They're like trolley cars.
Yep.
And what they didn't know is that they were also planning on shutting it down in one of our, how do you say it? One of our critical infrastructure buildings downtown.
Okay.
So it's a place that we cannot allow, for people to come in and out of. It's a Homeland Defense kind of building.
Yeah.
So it's an infrastructure building, just like headquarters, just like the federal courthouse. We can't allow people to shut those down.
Yeah, there's certain sites that are more sensitive than others, but also just have to remain operational for, everything, for operations in general.
Right. So that was the place that they chose was part of that infrastructure. And it was at that point that the commander at the time told Ben Moore, this is over. And we had made dozens and dozens of announcements on the LRAD that this was no longer a peaceful protest. This is an unlawful assembly, and you need to disperse. So that being said, we move in. We call it tangling up, or to defeat them being arrested. They basically intertwine their arms and legs and then they take the umbrella so we can't see what's underneath them, and they kind of turtle up in all together, and there's about 17 of them. So we physically have to go in, pull the umbrellas out, grab each individual, pull them and separate them from each other, which is where guys got injured. They hurt their arm. I was bleeding. You can't see what's going on. And they detonated another one of those smoke bombs during that time. A couple of my guys deployed some pepper ball because people were being uncooperative. We had an individual armed with an AK, not an AK, an AR-15 and a pistol. We had acetone, you name it, rocks, bricks.
Yeah, the 17 people are also still part of a larger group that's causing chaos.
It started larger, and that's what ended up staying at the very end when we arrested them. We got 17.
Okay.
So obviously we process all these people. We book them on the riot charges and all that kind of stuff. Again, to April's point, no conversation about criminal street gang, criminal syndicate at that point even. But we book the 17 people. And then we have a meeting at Phoenix Police on the 20th of October. And that is from our investigations lieutenant who calls this meeting. So neither April nor I called this meeting. But I had a conversation with some of the gang detectives and a gang sergeant and a gang lieutenant on the behavior of these people and how it meets the criteria of being a criminal street gang or a criminal syndicate.
On that too, if I can ask ask both of you kind of what would be the issue if you had even had that in your mind ahead of time? I mean, you're seeing all this, all the communications and the coordination. You're seeing repeat offenders. They've obviously got plans. They're working as a group. Like, wouldn't that just be the normal thing from the law enforcement, maybe even the prosecutor side, to say, like, I don't know, I think you're meeting these elements. Like, why aren't we looking at them as a gang? Like, does it make a huge difference in your case that you didn't have these meetings and didn't think about it till after this October event?
No, it wouldn't to matter at all. We could have been looking at these individuals from the very beginning as criminal street gang members. But to tell you the truth, it didn't even come into play, at least in my mind, until I'm sitting there reading the reports that were submitted for these defendants. I think it was on October 19th, because under Arizona law, if somebody is arrested, the officers have to provide the submittal to us within 48 hours, and excluding holidays and weekends and stuff like that, but about 48 hours. So I'm starting to look at these reports on October 19th. And as I'm reading through the reports, I do have in my mind, the signal chats, and I looked up the date of the signal chat. The signal chats were in July, August, around that time period. I can't remember when the gang unit guys ended up doing the search warrants, but those are the dates on the signal chats. And it's very interesting to note that as the signal chats are going back and forth, they're talking about attorneys telling them back in July, you guys are acting like a criminal street gang.
Their own attorneys.
Whoever they were talking with, because we do know that there was at least one attorney that was allowing these guys to meet at their husband's office or something like that. But the funny thing is that they had been warned by defense attorneys or attorneys that, hey, you guys can potentially be labeled as a criminal street gang. And in fact, they didn't even care. And one of the signal chats from one of the individuals that was arrested on October 19th, back in July, August timeframe, pretty much basically talked about being proud about being labeled as a criminal street gang. So even though we weren't thinking about it, they clearly were, because it's right there in their signal chats. And one thing that I want to point out, because I don't want to forget this, Nathan, is that we're going to start up a a website called politicallycharged.com. That's the website, politicallycharged.com. And we're going to upload as much as this of the information that we potentially can, so people they don't have to listen to us. They don't have to take what we have to say for word. Go and take a look at it. And because the information that is out there in the news media, specifically by ABC15, is absolutely incorrect and really does not tell the full story. For instance, Doug said on October 17th that some of those individuals had weapons. If you go and you look at the news reports by ABC15 or any other news agency, you will not see one article that says that these guys were armed and that they had weapons with them, and that one of them had a brick with a smiley face on it, and that they had, had all the ACAB insignia and stuff.
Has anything come out of that though? Like, has anybody asked them why? Did they give any reason why, if asked? They just plead ignorance, or what do they do?
It's funny that you say that, because, and I'm not going to say the dude's name because I don't want to give him any clout whatsoever. But the news reporters from ABC 15, they specifically from a public records request got a hold of a PowerPoint that I put together that's going to be uploaded into the politicallycharged.com website, specifically laying out the signal chats, the organization, how they met the definition of a criminal street gang, the whole 9 yards, and how these individuals were armed with weapons. And ABC 15 had no problem publishing so many different documents and everything. I mean, in violation of the law, they published the grand jury transcript from the October 17th grand jury proceeding. But they've never once published this PowerPoint because it goes against their narrative. And they don't want to say what they had been reporting the whole entire time was quite misleading, missing major facts. So I think even if we were to ask them, they wouldn't come up with anything good.
Yeah.
Well, Nathan, further on that, let me just circle a little bit back with my department and what was going on with my department at that time. Is that they had been told by our city manager, by our city council, and to include the mayor, that my chief was not allowed to release anything through the media. It had to all go to city council to be approved prior to them releasing anything to the media. So no rebuttal of any of the facts that ABC 15 reported, no rebuttal was ever done. No counter report was shown that say, that's not what happened. This is the video footage of what actually happened. And basically, my department was muzzled during that time and could not respond in any way.
I think a lot of this is people just didn't want to take on anything that had to do with the BLM narrative. I think people were just absolutely lost like all spine and wanted no part of anything to do with speaking out against it or any of the protests that were happening as a result. Mind you, this is all also going on during COVID, where nobody's allowed to go to each other's homes. But as long as you're in a group of thousands of people, no, COVID did not spread, which is just hilarious how this all played out. Sad, but
the crazy part about COVID is I went through the whole summer, 170 days around thousands of people, and I got it on Christmas. After we were all done.
I've said to a few people, because we up here, I was with our gang unit at the time, and we were going around finding people having like all these underground parties and stuff. And so we're walking in and kicking people out of all these big parties that they're having. It was probably the healthiest 2.5 years I ever had. I never got sick. I was sick before it, which I probably had COVID at that time. But the next 2 years, and yeah, we had entire squads wiped out, worked overtime. Yeah. Okay, it was crazy time. But yeah, so anyway, that's a total side story. But so the department's kind of getting muzzled. This is city council and the city manager up, in Phoenix. And I think this goes for a lot of US cities. So you don't have a commission as a buffer between city council and like the chief of police, the police service.
So the hierarchy goes like this. It goes mayor, city council, then it goes city manager, and then you have assistant city managers for all the other departments. So like Parks and Rec has an assistant manager, the police department has an assistant manager, vice versa down the line.
Okay.
So the buffer is, so it's supposed to work like this. The chief is supposed to be autonomous in their decisions on charging people with crimes and investigating crimes. And they have to report to the assistant city manager and the city manager, but ultimately the chief is supposed to have the final say in any ongoing criminal investigations. And this ended up not being the case, is that the city manager was very involved with this particular case. And he said that it was spurred on by the media reports that he saw. That's how he started this whole thing. So probably from here, Nathan, I think we need to go to the meeting at headquarters.
Well, hold on. We're not there. We're not there yet.
Oh, yeah.
One thing. So,
No, go ahead.
So, no, that's fine. Because Nathan, one of the questions that you had asked me was, or asked us was, did you have to have, was there an issue that you guys weren't looking at the gang charges before? And so to go back to that kind of vein of thought, so it didn't matter that we didn't, we could have been looking at them, but we just weren't.
Yeah.
Even though we knew about the coordination and what was in the signal chats. But once I'm sitting there and I'm taking a look at these reports from October 19th, I'm seeing all the coordination, everything that's happening, the tattoos, the knowing of the ACAB being spray painted, just everything that is appearing on the piece of paper that I have seen in traditional criminal street gang investigations, into the Hells Angels, the Bloods and Crips, and all of those types of organizations is leaping out at me as a 5-year plus gang prosecutors, leaping out at me from the paper saying criminal street gang fits 100%.
Yeah.
And so I then called my immediate supervisors. I didn't even say anything about it. I just said, hey, let me give you a set of facts and tell me what you think. And they were both on board. There's criminal street gang here, 100%, because they too had been previous gang prosecutors. So then I called up Doug and I was all like, you were a gang detective. You've been working these guys the whole entire summer. You've been seeing like the graffiti being left and the whole 9 yards. And sure enough, Doug was like, yeah, criminal street gang all the way.
It's important here, Nathan, to just document this because this is huge. And it's been an accusation that's been throughout this entire process, is that we conspired to do this. It was me and April, and we conspired to do this whole thing and charge all these people, right? But I want to note, I independently spoke to some of my gang detective buddies about this and said, what do you think about gang charges, criminal syndicate charges?
Mm-hmm.
She independently was talking to her chain of command, and independent of both of us that we didn't know was the lieutenant over investigations had already said he thinks this is we didn't know this at the time until October 20th, but he's the one who actually stood up in the room and said, I think we have criminal street gang charges on this group of people.
Well, then either way, the facts are there or they're not. Like, I don't even get how it would be an accusation that you would be conspiring to do this against your group. It's like, you got to put it through and a whole bunch of people got to approve this process and it's going to go to court and it's going to play out. Like, I don't know. It just seems kind of crazy.
It's because of the narrative being thrown out there by the news media. And that is that we created a fake gang, that we didn't really look at the facts. We didn't look at the statutes. We didn't do anything. We created a fake gang. And just like the city manager glammed onto thinking everything that we did and everything throughout the summer was wrong based on news reports, that's exactly what somebody in my office did. All they did was, and this person testified at my bar hearing, and all and admitted that, oh, well, whenever I saw the news media reports, I thought something was wrong. And then later admitted that they had never even reviewed the amount of information that Doug and I reviewed and what we knew what was going on throughout the summer. So taking bits and pieces, just like a lot of people, a lot of people assumed that a majority of the individuals out there were Black. No, there was one Black dude and the rest of them were white.
Yeah.
And I think one was like maybe of Indian descent. I don't know what she was. But the point is that it's these types of narratives that got so far twisted that that's why the whole conspiring came into play for us, which then ended up putting me out home for 18 months on administrative leave, and then me eventually losing my job, and then Doug being sent home for the longest person in the department history of being sent home.
Well, so let's get into that. And so at this point now, you're talking about doing the gang charges. You've had all these consultations on both ends, so both police, prosecutor sides. Mm-hmm. You made the connection between the two of you. So you do decide to proceed with these charges. You said your bosses, April, approved this. So what happens next?
So that's exactly what happened. We ended up going to the grand jury and getting indictments. The grand jury presentation was quite lengthy because we didn't want to leave anything out.
You had that video encapsulating that evening, right? The October 17th evening. And just another note, everyone in the Phoenix Police Department was on board because we had a meeting at the headquarters with all 3 assistant chiefs, all the command staff from investigations, downtown operations, and Homeland Defense. And the FBI was there looking at a RICO case, which was how coordinated this group was.
Yeah, and that's extremely important to know that that meeting did in fact occur, and in fact, the U.S. Attorney's Office had representatives there because they were looking at potential federal charges. And so none of that information has ever been, released out to the public with regards to how many layers myself and Doug went through in order to make sure that the gang charges, fit. We had the evidence and we had the facts to support the evidence that was found and everything that we had learned. So we get the indictments and everything's going smoothly. Now, so that's October 17th. It is an election year. And the then county attorney that was running, Alistair Adele, she ended up slipping and falling and hitting her head on election night and suffered a traumatic brain injury. And so she was in the hospital for a couple of months. And again, everything was going smoothly. And then all of a sudden, ABC-15 starts touting this fake gang. These people were wrongfully charged and the whole 9 yards. And then it just spiraled out of control. And the facts, the truth, all went to the wayside. Nobody was looking at the facts. I felt like, and I'm sure Doug felt like this as well, is that me personally, I felt like I was screaming in a vacuum saying, it's all here. Open your eyes and see what the evidence shows in coordination with the actual gang statutes.
Well, I think a lot of the tactics by people who try to flip narratives like that is to make you think that you're the crazy one. Even if you have facts, you're like, I'm looking at it right in front of me. And they're like, no, don't believe your eyes. And they're trying to make you act like or look like you're the crazy person out of all of this. And they just keep saying it over and over till it becomes the truth. And I mean, if you're media, you repeat it enough times, everybody else starts saying and it becomes the truth. That's difficult. That is super difficult to deal with. At any point, did anybody find out, is there a connection between this group and any of these reporters or the editors deciding what's going out, on the nightly news? Like, why was this particular media company or media in general in that area, why were they so hell-bent on spinning a certain narrative?
So this particular reporter for ABC 15 has had a long history with the Phoenix Police Department. And there's several rumors that go around, and I'm not a big rumor guy of why. But he has always targeted us with negative reports. If you look at his history of reporting,
Yeah, okay.
never a positive spin. And there's so much positive that goes on with the Phoenix Police Department. And he chooses always to focus on the negative.
Okay. We have some of that up here.
I'm sure,
I honestly think I feel bad for those people in a way, because it's like, that must be a tough life to live, always being in the negative. Like, it's just, I don't know how you would do it.
I can't stand it, to be honest with you. I'm not that guy. So, but he just does. He does. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it, again, rumors are rumors. All I can do is speculate, but it's always been negative from him. And, with this particular case, when he started these reports, and our leaders are only looking at those reports and they're not looking to their resources. City manager has the chief, the assistant city manager, all the assistant chiefs, all the commanders. Like, get these people in the same room and let's talk about what's going on.
Yeah.
And if you don't like it, say you don't like it, or like in April's case, the county attorney just could have said, let's scratch the charges and start over. We didn't have, it happens all the time. I mean, you start with first degree murder, you scratch and go, we're going second degree. It happens all the time.
Yeah.
So this could have been a very simple fix of, hey, April, we don't like this where it's going. Let's scratch the charges. Let's do some more homework. Let's get some more background and then move forward.
Yep.
Instead of turning it into a witch hunt. I mean, sending her home, a highly decorated attorney. I'm a 30-year highly decorated officer with no discipline whatsoever, and have had an exceptional career. And instead of that, you turned it into this
kind of a blame game, somewhat scapegoating people.
Yeah. I mean,
so you end up deciding to lay this gang charge against this group. Can you explain for people too, just kind of contextualize what do you mean by gang, or what's the the criteria that they were meeting?
So in the state of Arizona, it's 2 or more persons participating in criminal activity and declaring, West Side City or ACAB or Hell's Angels, claiming to be a part of that group.
Okay.
In Arizona, if you meet 2 of those criteria, there's 7 criteria for the gang member identification criteria. And if you meet 2 of those 7, and examples of that is tattoos, gang signs, documentation, colors, different things like that. So if you meet 2 of those or more, you can be considered a gang member.
And when we say consider a gang member, that's on the police side. So like that's not necessarily for prosecution, or would it be one and the same?
So that would be for me, for police. I can enter that person into the database as a gang member.
All right. From
the prosecution side, though, April, you got that.
Yeah. So under the Arizona revised statutes, the definition of a criminal street gang is an ongoing formal or informal association of persons. Okay. That's the first part. Whose members or associates individually or collectively engage in the commission, attempted commission, facilitation, or solicitation of any felony act, and who has at least one individual who is a criminal street gang member. Now, what does that mean? Like Doug said, there's another definition that at least one of those individuals has to meet one of the 7 criteria: the tattoos, the witness statements, admissions, things of that nature. And so what we had here on October 17th, we had several individuals that had tattooed ACAB or 1312 on themselves. We had several individuals that were wearing ACAB indicia. They were wearing the black block clothing, which and we didn't make any of this stuff up. We're following their lead. They're the ones that chose the black block clothing. They're the ones that chose the tattoos. They're the ones that chose what their tattoo was going to be. And in fact, later on, as we're pulling all the case together before everything was dismissed, we were finding through social media accounts for some of these individuals that they were very proud of. Oh, here's a whole bunch of new drawings for some new ACAB tattoos. And pretty much basically, again, going back to what they were doing back in July, being proud of potentially being labeled as a criminal street gang. And the definition that they ended up meeting, and I think that this gets lost with a lot of people, okay? Because in order for us to be able to prove the criminal street gang, first we have to show that they meet that definition that I just told you about. We have to meet that there's at least one individual that is a criminal street gang member. But then we also have to prove that they were, I'm getting to the statute. Hold on one second. Just give me a second.
Well, while you're doing that, just for clarity, so one person can be a gang member. The other people hanging with them that are committing the crimes can then be considered a gang member if, they're doing the same acts?
They can be considered as associating, furthering the objectives of the criminal street gang.
Yeah.
They don't even have to be documented as a member. There is a litany of errors. There's a case, State v. Brian Harm, and I know that case because I prosecuted the guy, and it was upheld, and it's a published opinion where the court specifically came out and said that you don't have to be a member of a criminal street gang in order to further the gang's objectives.
Yeah.
And so we had all of the individuals from October 17th, except for one that met at least two of the criteria to be documented as criminal street gang members. Hold on one second. Let me just pull this up.
While you're looking that up, I was going to ask Doug, the database that you're talking about, so do people have to be in this database? Does that have any bearing on whether they can be prosecuted as a gang member? Or is that's just a separate intel thing? That's the police own.
It's supposed to be a separate intel thing, and it's overseen in Arizona by the Department of Public Safety, our state troopers. However, people have interpreted it as if the gang's not already in there and you don't have gang members in there, then you can't go after them as a gang member, and that's not true.
Okay,
because we had, and April can definitely go into this, in the 2000s, 2010s, we had these groups popping up that were called tag bangers. So it wasn't your traditional Crips or Bloods. They were like a tag crew. So they'd go around spray painting stuff, and then they would commit felonies, like actual murders and stabbings and shootings. And so theoretically, that group was not in the database yet. It was a new group, as this group would have been a new group. So at that point, you have to figure out the new group and submit that to go into gang net, is what we call it. And then you subsequently add members to that group, right?
Yeah.
So it's a process, and April's I know you prosecuted some of those dudes. But that's what the process would have been, is that ACAB would have been listed in GangNet as a gang, a political organization gang. And then we would have added those members, and we did that. We submitted the paperwork to that, but ETS was told not to process that.
Yeah, and you know what? It makes sense. It's two separate things. So one is to just help kind of inform, maybe influence some of the decision making within the police department itself. How are you going to resource a response to something? How are you going to attack this issue. And it's just the intelligence collection piece is all separate from the prosecution side. Prosecution, you're looking for the elements of the offense. Do you meet this? Away we go. It doesn't matter what the cops want to call you or whatever checkbox is. Yeah, okay. So I just wanted to make sure that was kind of clarified.
Yeah, just a further part on that too is that I just need probable cause. April's usually looking for reasonable likelihood of conviction.
Yeah. Okay. The same up here. Similar, different terms, same thing.
Yeah. And that was one of the biggest things that a lot of people don't understand. And I looked it up. I was all like, okay, what is this GangNet database? It's a federally blessed database that the Western states can use. And you have to follow the rules that are set out by the feds in order to have this cross-border database and for all these agencies to be able to use this intelligence database. Like for instance, one of the rules is that if a gang member is in this database, but they haven't been contacted for 5 years, then they get purged from that database.
Okay.
And a lot of times what happens, it used to be that if they're in prison, that time was told out, so you didn't count that time. Well, they changed it a while back now that if they're not contacted in prison or not, then they get purged from the database. So you would have a lot of West Side City guys come out or Mau guys come out that were documented, went to prison for 10, 15 years, then came out and then got we're doing criminal street gang activity, and everybody's like, oh, they're not in the database. Well, I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't have to prove that this database shows anything.
Yeah, it has no bearing on it.
Correct. And so a lot of people are like, well, ACAB wasn't in the gang database. And this is one of the falsities that was peddled by ABC-15 about that we created this fake gang because they weren't in this GangNet database.
Yeah.
GangNet, in fact, I think a lot of agencies are getting away from GangNet because it is so, the information in there is so inaccurate. Like, for instance, I was working and I was looking at a case and I said, hey, to one of our secretaries that had access, because only a few people get access to it. I said, hey, can you look up this Park South? Okay, Park South, which is a legit criminal street gang in Arizona. Very violent. And in fact, while in 2020, a lot of the gang detectives, because we did try to get one of the gang detectives to come in and be another expert basically for us. We were told no, they didn't have any gang detectives available because there was a gang war going on in Park South. Okay, so legit criminal street gang. So she comes up and she's like, hey, and she prints it off. She shows me the information. I was like, no, I said, what is this? She got it wrong and she put in South Park. Okay, we all know what South Park is, right? Okay. It's a cartoon. Yeah. But in the GangNet database, somebody had entered South Park into the database, and it was one dude. And I was like, what the hell is this? I'm like, this needs to be taken out. So but with that being said, it's the database is not accurate sometimes. So, but it doesn't matter. What I would be looking at as a former prosecutor, and I should say this in my training and experience, I would be looking at one, does the group meet the definition of a criminal street gang? Okay. Do we have at least one person? Then I would be going to the next part, and that is a person commits assisting a criminal street gang by committing any felony offense, whether completed or preparatory, for the benefit of, at the direction of, or in association with any criminal street gang. So, and I would use this type of example, and we use this type of example when we went and did the charging. And I even used this example when we had a big, huge office meeting on whether or not the charges should still stand. And that is that I'm not a Lindo Park rep. Okay. Well, actually, we'll go back to the Park South. Park South, legit criminal street gang. I'm not a member of Park South. Okay. But if I'm walking in their territory and I'm sitting there yelling, screaming out, Park South, fuck the police, this and that. And I walk up to an officer and say, I'm going to fucking kill you. I'm Park South and the whole 9 yards. I've just committed the crime of threatening or intimidating by placing this person in reasonable apprehension of imminent physical injury.
Yeah.
Right. And I've just put the whole entire gang, because I've invoked Park South. Okay. And so those are the types of things that I would be looking for. And that's why criminal street gang was leaping out at me from the report. And I think that there's a lot of disconnect, especially in the news reports. Despite ABC 15 having my PowerPoint, nobody has ever once broken down the statute.
Yeah.
And has explained to the general public what the statute means. And one of the things that they try to do is they try to flip it and say, well, the Phoenix Police Department can meet the definition of a criminal street gang. A bunch of yoga instructors can, if they're all doing yoga in the park and everything. But here's the deal is that they're not committing felony offenses for the benefit of the Phoenix Police Department.
Yeah.
And if a yoga instructor goes out and commits an armed robbery, they're probably not doing it in furtherance of their yoga group.
Yeah.
And that's where the disconnect became, because all of these guys on October 17th were committing the offenses in furtherance of ACAB, which they themselves took ACAB and turned it into their own criminal street gang name. Not something we made up. They did it.
Yeah. I hate when people just take like a definition of something and it's just cognitively laziness. It's it's like there are elements and they have to be explained. It's not as simple as just, well, A, then B, then C. It's like, well, no, there's like a whole bunch of nuance to how this stuff is written down, how it's interpreted, how it's implemented when you're talking about all these offenses. So just to make sure we get everything in within kind of the time's sake here.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering now, where does this all kind of flip? So you've laid these charges against these people. You're looking at the gang route against them. You're going for that. But what all of a sudden makes the system kind of turns and says, we're going to toss this. We're not going to go ahead. But then they decide to come after you. And I think this goes back to the city manager, if I'm not mistaken, when I was looking at the statement of facts.
The script was flipped on me first. In February, all of a sudden I get, my bosses are calling me up saying, hey, Alistair's out of the hospital. They want to have a meeting. They want you to brief, the gang charges and, pretty much basically, show the evidence that you have and everything and what's going on. And so I said, sure. So I literally 24 hours, to get ready for this. Now, keep in mind, we've already been given permission by the higher ups to hire an outside gang expert. And that was Clint Davis. Clint Davis is one of the most well-respected gang experts, worked for the city of Phoenix for years, has consulted on different cases, has even taught the NFL on how to recognize, criminal street gang members. So the office provided the money to hire him. And so he came in, he looked at everything and stuff like that. And he's like, yeah, this meets a criminal street gang. So because we're still in COVID, kind of everybody's, coming in for this big meeting and everything. We didn't have Doug and we didn't have Ben there for the briefing. I should have had them there, but because of COVID, was pretty much basically limited. But I did have our outside gang expert. And so we pretty much basically laid out everything, told them how we met how everything meets the definition of the criminal street gang. And that was pretty much basically it. I was told, okay, you're good, go home. Later that afternoon, I get a phone call saying that they wanted me to dismiss the charges. And I distinctively remember telling my bureau chief and my division chief, my career's over. I said, if we dismiss these charges, I said, I'm done. And I said, we have the evidence.
But what do you mean by you're done? Like like reputational damage, or just you?
Reputational damage, just because of everything that was in the news media.
Okay.
Hearing my name in the news media every single day about the, a fake gang, and everything, and not one, and the higher ups not standing behind us. They just pretty much basically turned around, said dismiss the charges, and then I think it was 2 days later I was placed on administrative leave. And whenever they told me that I needed to dismiss the charges, I was all like, this is not good for me. And it was just, how you get that feeling, that sixth sense that, everything's going to fall down on me.
Well, one of the worst parts of that is I'm guessing nobody's telling you what's going on, right? You're left in the dark.
Correct.
You just get phone calls that tell you, hey, this is happening, or do this. And it's like, what was the conversation behind the scenes? So being left in the dark is one of the hardest things, especially when it comes from your own institution, your own organizations. I've always found that's the hardest part of this job. I can go out and deal with all the bad guys all day. I expect them to sometimes do bad things to police. Like, it's like, okay, you're the bad guys, I'm the police. But when it comes from your own organization, that is by far the hardest stuff I've ever had to deal with. So I imagine that's kind of similar for you.
Yeah, and all I knew was I was sitting there working. A couple days after that, and I get a phone call asking if I was at home, and that 2 investigators were on their way with a letter, and they showed up on my front door, and sure enough, there was the you're being placed on administrative leave. There was nothing in the letter to say what policies I violated or anything like that. They took my equipment.
Wow.
And that was pretty much basically it. And then I was put on a complete blackout. I wasn't able to speak to any coworkers with the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. I wasn't able to speak to any employees of the county, and it even said and/or officials. So I was afraid to talk to even police officers, because if I did any of those things, I could be fired. And so 18 months of staring at, gray walls and trying to figure out what the hell happened, was quite interesting.
Well, we'll get to kind of where you're at just as like a wrap up, but I'll go to Doug and what happened with your side of this fallout.
So it took a few months. So, and a lot of this I found out after the fact, Nathan. So I'm just gonna put it out there because I don't remember how it all came in. But basically what I know is a letter came from Maricopa County to my police chief, and basically stating concerns that all of these employees, and I forget the entire list, but basically named a bunch of us on the Phoenix Police Department and said, you guys need to look into this possible policy violations, if not criminal violations.
Did that, and if I could just jump in real quick, did that not come from the city manager though? I think that was in the statement of facts.
Well, it came from, the original letter came from Alistair Adele. I'll get to the city manager.
Okay.
But Alistair Adele, or somebody on her behalf, wrote a letter that went to directly to my police chief. And what I didn't know is she actually delegated that letter to one of her assistant chiefs, who had authored a 4-page memo that said everyone on the Phoenix Police Department did what they were supposed to do and no policies were violated. Now that I have copies of that, but that memo was never seen by anybody.
Okay.
So at some point, what I was told by my friends who are assistant chiefs that were all part of this board of chiefs is that my police chief is summoned to the city manager's office. When she comes back from after meeting with the city manager, that's when she assigns me to home and kicks Ben Moore and several other people out of the downtown operations units and puts one guy in civilian clothes. I was at home, not allowed to work as a police officer.
So is this like a suspension without pay? or a suspension with pay?
with pay, administrative.
Okay.
Yeah. So I get called in June 1st, I believe, of 2021, the first week in June, and I'm told to, not even by my police chief, but by an assistant chief, we have to place you on administrative leave. They don't take my gun or my badge, because everyone in the police department knows it's horseshit, and knows that we, just to give context, my police chief was ecstatic with what we did during 2020 and all the riots. Absolutely ecstatic. She gave me a hug almost every time I saw her.
Yeah.
So mine was a very weird situation because no one on the police department was mad at me. Typically when you have a police, you do something wrong.
Yeah.
Your boss pissed at you, you whatever. But no one on the police department was mad at me. So they didn't take my gun or my badge. They just assigned me to home. So basically there I sat. And in August of 2021, I was told by several people who were in the room, my police chief walked in and said, I want Doug McBride fired by Friday.
Wow.
And three assistant chiefs stood up and said, you can't do that. He has due process. He's at home. There's an investigation that needs to be conducted. You can't do that. And she didn't like that answer, ends up coming back the next day or the next couple days and demoting those three chiefs to commanders. And then the only name that was put in the memo was mine. So she said the memo said I demoted three police chiefs, but Sergeant Doug McBride has been placed on administrative leave. And I was told also that she was advised not to do that. And she chose to do it anyway. So that went out citywide and publicly that I was assigned to home, Sergeant McBride, and the ABC 15 reports kept going, just like April said. Doug McBride, I had a city councilman call for my termination on city letterhead.
Wow.
Carlos Garcia, I believe, was the guy who did that. And you're not allowed to do that. So we went to federal court, and the federal judge said, well, you didn't sustain any damages. But it says right here, he's not allowed to do that. He's not allowed to interfere with personnel.
Mm-hmm.
After that, I just sat at home. And, I basically, like April said, for 32 months. So I was at home for almost 3 years.
Wow.
And not even a policy violation, nothing. So what happened with the city, and I'll go through this pretty quick. The city manager hired an outside agency, Ballard Spahr, to do an independent look into our police department. Ballard Spahr, again, and this is all in depositions now and in our federal hearings that we've done. Ballard Spahr admittedly did an incomplete report, which was rushed by my city manager, which he stated in his deposition. He rushed it because he was under pressure from city council to get some answers.
Yeah. And again, that was in the facts. That is out there. It's that they were missing a large portion of the information that was available.
So then he wanted me investigated criminally for perjury during the grand jury.
All of us.
Yeah.
All of us.
And he shopped it. He went to the attorney general's office twice. They turned it down. Our own internal criminal guy said there's no prima facie that a crime has been committed. I can't even interview him. 7 other agencies turned it down because there was no criminal element whatsoever. And this is where it gets fun. So he decides to go in front of city council, and this is all publicly documented. And he asked for $250,000. He says, we need to look into this criminally. And he gets awarded the $250,000. He goes to MCSO. Paul Penzone is the sheriff at the time. And Paul says, I don't have people to investigate this stuff. I'm tied up with my own DOJ deal where I'm investigating more people internally than I am criminally. So somehow, I don't know if Paul Penzone does it or if my city manager does it, they get a hold of this retired FBI guy, Jim Eggleston. And he takes the contract to investigate this. It takes him 3 years to submit an initial report. That report came out in September of 2025. So
recently.
4 years. And after he submits the report internally, the clock starts for the internal. And so there's two investigations. There's the criminal investigation that he has, then there's the internal that runs simultaneously. So once the criminal is taken care of, the internal now starts a time clock of 180 days, so 6 months. At about the 4.5 month, so January-ish, so it comes out, the report comes out in September, about midway through January, this guy shows up, and now there's been, so I digress. The first report comes in September 2025. Pinal County attorney turns it down, says there's no relevant charges on this document.
Yeah.
An election cycle happens. My 180 days is counting. It gets to January of 26.
Yeah.
No.
I think it was 24, then 25.
Oh, okay.
24.
I'm sorry, 24, then 25. Yes, I'm sorry. So September of 24, the report comes out. 180 days starts. They bring me back to work in January of 25. And in February of 25, this guy shows back up at Pinal County. There's a county attorney there and says, I didn't finish my report. That's not complete. I have more interviews to do. Reference perjury. Remember, this is the charge, perjury.
Yeah.
So he says his big interview that he did not complete was of the gang police assistant who processes the gang member identification criteria forms. He pulls her in for an interview, which, again, tell me how that proves a crime. She's an administrator.
Yeah.
There's no. And then he proceeds. So the first report was 176 pages of nonsense. He resubmits another 200 plus page report in June or July of that year, which again gets turned down again for the second time by the new sitting county attorney. So 2 county attorneys turn it down.
That's a lot of writing to always be wrong.
370 something pages. But he probably made a half $500,000.
Wow.
Over the
And he submitted the charges again on all of us, including myself. So we were all being criminally looked at. I didn't even know I was being criminally looked at until the first turn down came from the prior county attorney. And I got a letter from my attorney saying, congratulations, you're not being criminally charged. I was all like, wow, go ahead and just keep on piling on.
So basically after that, I worked for a little bit and retired this past December, with the internal investigation still incomplete.
But you're not subject to anything now that you're out of the police, right? Like once you leave the police service, you're not subject to any discipline from that, stemming from that.
No, so the reports just came out yesterday. The internal reports came out, and there's 2 of them. And one I'm not involved with at all. The second one, supposedly they have sustained some allegation against me in the second report.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, that's a right up to date update. And are you waiting just to hear what that was? Like, are they going to have any communication with you?
It's shocking. It's never been done before. That should be my middle name, Doug. It's never been done before, McBride. So we're trying. My union is literally trying to figure out what do we do, because you're retired. You have now a sustained allegation against you, which is completely horseshit.
Mm-hmm.
What's the process? What's the process for you to have due justice or to have any kind of say in what goes on, or does it just sit there?
Because at this point, it just becomes more reputational then, right? Like it's because they can't dock you hours or demote you or anything. Like you're gone.
I think it's so. When I read the first report, I haven't read the second report yet, but it looks like each report just dumps everything on the guys who are retired or not with the department anymore.
Ah, okay. Jeez, eh? Just taking, like, it's just constant, like, try and find somebody to blame or someone who's not here, find some faceless, nameless being or something and throw it on them. So April, where's your process at then?
So I was fired. I in Arizona for the Maricopa County Attorney's Office, there's a merit process, but after speaking with some experts that know about employment matters and stuff like that, I just didn't have the money to fight it, and so I just forewent that. I went through a bar hearing and I was suspended for 2 years. And so so right now I'm making a determination as to whether or not I am going to reapply to have my license reinstated, which I can do in September. But I have to pay a quite hefty amount of money for that. So I'm debating on whether or not I want to do that. And I'm still working for Legal Services for Crime Victims in Arizona as their mentorship director, and then also doing Legion Lex Institute with my friend Vince Goddard, who was wrapped up on all of this as well. But that's where it stands.
Okay. You know what? We'll have to have you back on and get an update on like where everybody's at and, what kind of the fallout is once it's all wrapped up. And I would recommend people kind of try keep an eye on this and look up the stuff that is online. I mean, when you first reached out, I looked up some of the articles. I'll tell you, yeah, they were not good. Like, and that's all I could find was just articles were like very, very one-sided. But then when you sent some of the documents over and I'm reading all this stuff, I'm thinking like, wow, I've seen a lot of this type of thing go on before within the police services and with prosecutors. And, if somebody doesn't like something somewhere in the chain of command or whatever it might be in the prosecution service, they'll find somebody. They'll find somebody to kind of put it on. And that's, who knows what stories are going to get written about them. So, we're just coming up to the end of the time. I wanted to make sure you kind of get a moment to say if you are doing anything, any projects, anything on the go that you can kind of plug it here. April, you have Legion Lex that you're working with right now. Do you want to talk a little bit about them? And we'll say the website again that you are going to be putting out there.
Yeah, the website is legionlex.org. We're transitioning from an LLC to a nonprofit. So hopefully we can, when we get to that point, we can start offering classes for free for law enforcement. And they're pretty much basically practical classes on courtroom testimony, teaching, as well as teaching the general public about how the criminal justice system works, and also teaching officers of how prosecutors work and what they're looking at, because officers go through the academy and they focus a lot on tactics, which they need to, and safety and things of that nature, but not a lot on report writing and what a prosecutor needs to utilize in order to prove a case, and how officers can show that they know what they're doing and building up their credibility through those classes.
Yeah, the better articulation, putting forward like the, just more complete disclosure.
Correct. And we've got a couple of classes up right now. And so we're adding more and more to our catalog. We are moving over to a different platform. So there might be, when people go to the website, there might be some under construction stuff, but they can access a couple of the classes.
Okay. And the other website you mentioned was politicallycharged.com. Is that up and running yet?
That will hopefully be up and running before you plan on posting this. But it's going to be pretty much basically where people can go and take a look at, all of the stuff relating to all of this and make a determination themselves. And Doug is the one that is spearheading that. So if he wants to add anything more to that, I think that it's important that people, do some research on their own. Again, they don't have to believe what we have to say. Just go and take a look at the information yourself.
Yeah, well, and that's a big part of why I do this podcast. It's to kind of inform people beyond the headlines and the clickbait and all the social media and the pandemonium and panic that's on there. So, Doug, I'll kind of throw to you. So you're, what are you doing besides retired life now?
I'm actually writing a book.
Okay.
This is the cover of it, if you can see it. I don't know if it's called Nutshot, When Phoenix Leadership Took a Knee.
Send me the picture and I'll put it up.
Okay.
I'll put it up on social media, especially when you get it out. We'll have to help promote that.
I'm hoping by summer.
Okay.
It's not a hard read. It's an easy read, especially for our tier 1 operators. We have to keep it simple. Yeah, I'm just want to get the word out, get the story out. And, it would be really good if we could prevent this from happening to people in the future.
I don't know if the prevention, the politics always come into it. It's more how you handle it once you're in it. I've had a few guests on here. We've talked about processes. I've had one from the ATF, one from the U.S. Marshals, and go through these big stories of how just the process kind of comes down on them when they're trying to do the right thing. And it can be tough, but it's more like navigating it once you're in it, and the mental and the physical toll it takes on people too. We're just kind of at the end of the time. I want to say thanks for being on here and sharing your story. And I'm thankful that, you allowed me to be the platform to share it on initially. And I'll connect you with some people down the road here, and hopefully we can keep getting it further out there. So thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening in and following along with the discussions. Be sure to click the follow or subscribe button on your respective listening platform. Also, check out the Quiet Professional on X and Instagram under TQP780. And most importantly, please share where you can. Everyone has a part to play in getting these education and information pieces out there, so pass it along. Thanks again.